Okay, something topical for you today. Should atheists celebrate Christmas? I say that there's no problem with atheists celebrating Christmas, but I'm going to introduce you to a guy who says the opposite. I don't know, his YouTube channel is called something like à-bas-le-ciel. Probably hopelessly massacred that. I apologise if I have. His Twitter account is called Eisel Mazard, so maybe that's his name. And he's setting himself very much, as I suppose you would say, the Ebenezer Scrooge of atheism, but not just demanding his right for himself and his family not to celebrate Christmas, but chastising any atheists who do not follow suit. And what he's claiming in a nutshell is that effectively the rest of us, it's just typical, we're just so apathetic and lazy that we're not prepared to do the things that he's doing. It's not that we might have other reasons why we might not want to do the things that he's doing, and that what he wants to do, he claims, is to replace Christmas for him and his family with an entirely secular version, freed from any of the religious aspects whatsoever. Let's start off a new festival with new songs and new rhymes and new stories, etc, etc. Now, he's made two videos. It gets a little bit complicated. This video will be a little bit disjointed because his videos were. What I want to do first is to play you a clip from his second video, which suggests that he goes way beyond the religious, even though that's what he seems to be majoring on.
When I say, hey, I'm going to draw the line and I'm going to refuse to be a part of Christmas, I'm going to make this little bit of an effort to offer my daughter something meaningful, something more, something positive instead of Christmas. I'm going to write new stories and new songs. I'm going to try to offer her something better than Christmas and something better than the X-Men and Batman and Curious George. I'm going to take on that challenge. All of you, 100% of you, wrote back with insults telling me that I was crazy.
Well, on the face of it, it does sound a bit crazy. You're not even... You're majoring on Christmas and that it's all about religion, and that's what you're saying, and yet you're dragging in the X-Men and Curious George. So seemingly your beef is not just with religious culture, but it's every aspect of our culture. It's all just got to be knocked down. Just smash the lot down, and then I, Aisel Mazard, if that is your name, are just going to replace the entire edifice myself. I will write the songs. I will write the music. I will create the stories. It's either going to be... The thing is, the reason that these stories are successful is because they're good stories. The reason the music is successful is because it's wonderful music, right? Either what you're going to do is going to be a rehash of those things, and it's hard for me to understand why I should differentiate and prioritize what you've done over what they've done, or what you're going to do is just frankly going to be shit.
This isn't a framework that presents you with a challenge of saying, hey, you can't just replace a song with silence. You can't just raise the next generation, raise your own children with a blank sheet of paper where Christmas used to be, or where all these relatively meaningless stories used to be, whether we think of those as corporate children's fables like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man, or if we think of those as the folklore of the Dark Ages, or as the legacy of modern Western religion. And the creative element requires great self-discipline, great self-sacrifice, and real vulnerability, where people are going to laugh at you. People are going to make fun of you and scorn you because you're doing something genuinely and authentically nonconformist and creative and new.
So I listened to this on your original video, and really this is just a more longhand way of saying what you said on the clip I've already played, and the thought that I had, was just why bother, right? What are you gaining by this? It goes, for one thing, it goes against the grain of the way we operate as human beings. Even Christianity didn't operate this way. It employed syncretism to incorporate what was already there as it went around the world onto Christianity. And that's part of the celebration of Christmas, of course, as we'll come to in a minute. But I also don't understand what you're gaining. And it's not just Christmas, you're saying all these different things. Seemingly just undercut the whole lot, throw the whole lot away and replace it with something shiny and new. We've got to have new songs and new stories. Your stories are either just going to be mirrors of the things we already have because they're good stories and that's why they've risen to the top, or they're going to be crap. I mean, what's the idea that you incorporate more science, that you got sort of, I don't know, Newton Archimedes get together and have an adventure in a lab? I don't know. It sounds shit, doesn't it? You tell me what you're going to give me, which is as good as what we've got. And that's going to be difficult because it's cut from fresh cloth. It's like it's pressed out of plastic, right? Rather than having that authenticity to it. You tell me what you're going to do that's as good as what we've got, but isn't just the same as what we've got. And your daughter's not going to grow up and go, well, we just need now to undercut that and do it all fresh again. And then your daughter's children will just undercut whatever she does and do it all over again. It doesn't make any sense. I get the feeling it's like you and I are looking at a wonderful historic building and I'm admiring it for what it is and saying, I'm pleased that we still have this building. And I'm imagining all the lives and the people that have been in that building and what they've done and how its usage has changed and all the historical events that building has seen. I'm absorbing the history of the building and you're saying, let's just knock it down. We can build a concrete office block, which will be much more functional. Where's your heart? You know, you're saying that atheists can't just create this sterile environment. We've got to replace it with things. What I see from you is a sterile environment. You say it is laziness on my part that I don't want to dispense with Christmas. It isn't. It's because the environment, what will replace it if you do that is a sterile environment, because what you're going to do will be cut from fresh cloth. What I want to see is what has happened, which is to build on the Christmas as is. I did some research into Muslim attitudes, just a few minutes research to see what their attitudes to Christmas is, because of course Jesus is a prophet in Islam. Okay, they had two problems with it: the paganism of the past and the paganism of the present. The paganism of the past is the syncretism that led to Christmas as we have it, with Christianity absorbing existing winter festivals and all manner of other trappings along the way that we have got, especially over the last sort of 150 years, with Christmas trees and all these other things being imported into it. They objected to that, but there's also the paganism of the new, the commercialism. Christmas has effectively become a kind of slightly crass commercial festival. But what it is, for all that crass commercialism, what it is it has what we need for a celebration, which is that everybody's doing it at the same time, right? Maybe you want to replace it with Eisel Mazard Day on the 23rd of February. You can crack on with that, pal. But you'll be eating on your own and you'll be switching your TV on and there'll be no Eisel Mazard based films or an Eisel Mazard records playing on the radio. Everybody else won't be celebrating it. It won't be a national holiday. You'll be doing it on your own, because the whole point of a cultural celebration is that we all celebrate the same thing. And in terms of Christmas, most of us, I don't think there's anything that I do at Christmas which is explicitly religious. I don't think about Jesus. I don't go to church. Do you know how many people in the UK go to church on Christmas Day? It is about 3 or 4% of the population. That's what it is on Christmas Day, right? The other 96% don't really give a fuck about it, to be quite honest. They just have the family round, they open the presents, they have some nice food, and they watch the Queen's speech and a Bond film in the afternoon. That is what they do, because that's what it is.
All right. I think people don't realize how easy it is. It's too easy to take up the cause of atheism and skepticism merely as an excuse for cheating on your wife. And I'm sorry, but that is part of what's going on right now in 2018. That is part of the problem.
Oh, do you know, that's a pretty high level, a high standard of grubby behaviour. That you're not even satisfied with the, if you're not doing it my way, you're not atheisting right. No, you're going beyond that and just asserting that anybody that doesn't follow your lead has nefarious ulterior motives. It's not really that they don't believe in God, it's just that they want to be able to justify their bad behaviour. That isn't the first time I've heard anybody say that, but it's one of the first times I've heard somebody who is an atheist say that, really. I lose some respect for you when you say something like that. I also lost another chunk of respect, by the way, because several times in your video you claimed that the people you're engaging with aren't engaging with you in good faith, and you're not a troll and you're engaging in good faith. We had a series of engagements, and the last engagements was me saying that I was going to read the things that you'd linked me to and I was going to respond to your video, and you welcomed that. I had no more engagements with you, and then you blocked me, along with blocking everybody else, as along with deleting almost the entire Twitter exchanges that you had with people. Does that really smell right? Doesn't really smell right to me, pal.
And the torrent of excuses I've received, I don't know, maybe I received as many as 100 messages in total, many dozens of messages, from people who identify as skeptics and new atheists and as members of the movement. I received so many messages insisting to me that there's nothing wrong with celebrating a so-called secular Christmas. I really have to ask you guys to look in the mirror on this one. I really have to ask why it is you're overlooking the points I already made in my first video. It doesn't strike a chord with you. What if you lived in a society where people celebrated the birthday of Adolf Hitler? You may not know it, but you're living in a society like that right now. Every so often, one of those people comes on YouTube and uploads a video of that neo-Nazi subculture celebrating the birthday of Adolf Hitler. All over the world, including within Russia and within China, there are people who still celebrate the birthdays of Joseph Stalin, who celebrate Mao Zedong, who celebrate people who are responsible for mass murder. Those celebrations, those symbolic ritual events, they don't do harm in themselves. They don't hurt people directly. However, they demonstrate who you really are.
So this somewhat staggering false equivalence of celebrating Hitler's birthday with celebrating the modern instantiation of Christmas in a Western society was his kind of fallback argument. And it was the thing he got the most pushback over Twitter about. And no wonder, really, because it's so riddled with holes that it's hard, it beggars belief that anybody would even make this argument. The first criticism is obviously that the two things are not alike, certainly in my culture. How would I view somebody who celebrated Hitler's birthday? I'd view them with suspicion, right? Because it's not a normal thing to celebrate. I would assume that if you celebrated Hitler's birthday, that you had sympathies for Hitler, right? Because most people don't celebrate Hitler's birthday. You are going out on a limb to celebrate Hitler's birthday, so that really tells me, as he says there, it says something about you. Yes, it would in that instance. You really don't have to go out on a limb to celebrate Christmas. It tells me next to nothing about what you believe that you celebrate Christmas. You could be on the far right, you could be on the far left, you could be a centrist, you could be a devoutly religious person, or you could be one of the least religious person you've ever met, and you would still be celebrating Christmas. So how is this suggestion that we can read something into it? Christmas has a very, very different role within our society than celebrations of Hitler's birthday, for fuck's sake. Everybody celebrates Christmas. Everybody's taking part in this celebration, right? So if you take part in it, that's effectively what you're doing. You're in it for the ride. Quite honestly, for most people, we're in it for the ride, we're in it for the good time, for the celebration, for the family occasion, for the presents, for the TV, for the time off work. We're in it for those things. You cannot say the same thing with celebrating Hitler's birthday with a straight face. This is why I said to him, well, actually a much better analogy would be celebrating Halloween. The fact that I celebrate Halloween doesn't mean that I side with zombies and witchcraft, right? I'm not celebrating those things, am I? Right? We don't take these things seriously, most of us. He never really responded properly to that. He'd rather stick with Hitler's birthday. But the problem is, the way that he phrases this with regard to Hitler's birthday, it doesn't even make any sense, because there's nothing specific about Christmas that passes across to Hitler's birthday. Effectively what he's saying is, well, if you take part in a cultural celebration, what's the difference between celebrating Hitler's birthday as a cultural celebration? And yet this guy isn't saying, let's do away with cultural celebrations. He's saying, let's replace this cultural celebration with a new one that I'm going to cook up in my garage, making up all new songs and new stories and a new celebration. So I can still throw it back to you. Well, if we're celebrating your celebration, What's the difference between celebrating Hitler's birthday?
How is it that the new atheist movement has become so lazy that they do not expect of themselves what they expect Muslims to do in much more difficult circumstances? That they do not expect themselves to do what Hindus do in much more difficult circumstances? Would you accept for a minute that someone was an ex-Muslim and rejecting Islam if they participated in all of the outward trappings, rituals, and celebrations of the Muslim faith? You wouldn't accept it at all.
But that's really not what we're talking about, is it? Me celebrating Christmas isn't me taking part in all the trappings of the Christian faith, right? I haven't got little Christian mementos and crosses and things all around my house. I'm not going to church several times a day. I'm not declaring to people that I still believe in God when I secretly don't, right? All we're talking about is somebody celebrating Christmas. It's more or less the same. You say, oh yes, you'd object to it if it was anybody else, right? We know, for example, that there are lots of Jewish people who are entirely secular Jews. They do not believe in God anymore, but they still take part in all the Jewish festivals because it's part of a family bonding tradition, right? I have no problem with that. I have no problem with a Muslim or a Hindu or anybody else taking part in their festivals. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. In fact, my son goes to a nursery where there is not a single Hindu, and yet they went through Diwali celebrations because it's part of understanding other cultures and appreciating other cultures. I have no problem with that. You're accusing me of holding positions that I do not hold. I have no problem if a Muslim leaves his religion and declares to everybody he knows, look, I don't believe in God anymore, I don't believe in Allah anymore, but he still wants to take part in the family aspects of Ramadan. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
So here's a reply from Noel Plum. He's not famous, but like myself, he has a YouTube channel. He has about the same number of total views on YouTube that I have. I think he's been on YouTube for about the same length of time I have, too. And he replies, quote, "You are full of shit. Your point is the equivalent of saying, if you celebrate Halloween, you are fine with witchcraft being taught in schools and special political rights for Wiccans." Okay, just pause. Would he say that to a Muslim who was trying to get rid of Ramadan? To an ex-Muslim? Someone who was born Muslim and is now atheist? No. You would never insult someone who is openly struggling to raise their children as atheist non-Muslims in a Muslim majority state. You would never say that to them. You say that to me. And you say that to me because you're compensating for your own hypocrisy, fatuousness, and laziness.
You know, it's so easy to do what you do, isn't it? When you go back and delete all the tweets, isn't it? You made it look in this video like I was saying you're full of shit for doing what you're doing. You want to reinvent the wheel, right? You want to reinvent the Christmas wheel, right? You crack on with it, right? I couldn't give a crap about that, right? What I was calling you full of shit about was because you'd already mentioned the Hitler and Stalin and worshipping Hitler and Stalin's birthday analogy. That's what I was calling you full of shit about. You'd already said that anybody that isn't following your path, that any atheist that still celebrates Christmas and spends Christmas as a celebration with their family isn't doing atheism right, isn't a proper atheist advocate. That was why I said you was full of shit, and I stand by that. And you could be an ex-Muslim, you could be an ex-Hindu. I would say exactly the same thing.
I think every single one of you is a hypocrite who could not for even 1 year take on the burden of, in this same way, celebrating Muslim religious traditions in an atheist way, who could not for 1 year take on the celebration of Hindu cultural traditions in an atheist way. And you wouldn't, looking across the border to those countries, you wouldn't look fondly or kindly on someone who was themselves personally and inwardly an atheist, but raising their own child in that way within the strictures of a Muslim cultural tradition, of a Hindu cultural tradition. Because everything you believe, everything you represent, is a challenge to and a negation of that tradition.
I think all this shows is the distance between us, not just in terms of what we believe, but in terms of what you think people like me believe versus what people like me actually believe. I am somebody who has a lot of respect from our history. I think we learn a lot from our history, and I don't have a problem with that. And I'm all about taking our history and moulding it into something that is contemporary enough but retains the good bits of the past. That's why I'm a constitutional monarchist. I'm not a Republican, right? Because I think for the United Kingdom we have a remarkably stable democracy. Why risk that for the sake of a philosophical point, which is what Republicans will do? France has had 5 republics. It's on its 5th go in the time that we've had that one stable system. Why do that? Now, obviously, if we're starting afresh, I wouldn't say, hey, let's go for a monarchy, right? But we're not starting afresh. We're building on what we already have, and it's the same thing with Christmas. Is it good to have a cultural celebration? I think it is. It seems that you think it is. Now, if we were starting afresh within our culture, would I say, I tell you what, let's build it upon some archaic religion that nobody believes anymore? Of course I wouldn't say that, would I? But we're not starting afresh. We're starting on a position with a whole lot of history. And when I look back at that Christmas celebration, I see a whole load of depth and richness that has the culture that is so difficult to create from fresh cloth, which is why so many situations, why so many fledgling democracies fail, because you cannot get that stability and that history very easily. It takes a period of time to build up that. And so I believe in a process of taking what is already there and allowing it to evolve in the society that you have, which is what has actually taken place with Christmas. And it is the same thing. You talk about these other cultures. I admire people, actually, totally contrary to what you say, I admire people in these other cultures that can take a secular path in a day-to-day life, who can lose their religion and will say, that is what I've done, because, like you say, that's not an easy thing for them to do within the societies in which they live. It's a lot easier for me. It's not so easy for them, but still maintain the cultural trappings, the celebrations, the festivals, and manage to incorporate those. It's syncretism again, but going in the other direction, incorporating those religious things into a more secular basis and saying, do you know what, we can keep these things, right? Everybody enjoys them, let's keep them. You're saying that atheism and atheist activism has done a really, really poor job and it could have done so much better. Your Ebenezer Scrooge approach to Christmas isn't going to fucking sell it on anybody, quite honestly, is it? It's having the very worst effect. It makes atheism look like the most drab, droll, crap thing that you could possibly imagine. You want to stop believing in God, you've just got to abandon all the good stuff, right? All the stuff that you enjoyed, all the family festivals and celebrations, you've just got to chuck it all out. What a difficult sell that is, right? What you're giving me is all the wrong tools to be able to do the kind of thing that you're talking about. The reality is, if you look across Western Europe, not so much in the United States, but across Western Europe, Christianity it's going like that. Right, there is only about 33% of people in the United Kingdom that believe in God. Less than 50% of the population claim to be religious. Only 55% of people who claim to be Christians within the United Kingdom claim to believe in God, for crying out loud, right? We're doing it the way where Christmas remains, and we're having a great deal of success. Right? You're telling me that your method's going to work better? I don't think so, because it's just drab and dull. It's a really, really difficult sell that you're suggesting here. Okay, look, if you want to do what you want to do, you do it. You crack on and do it. I'm not going to shame you for doing it, and I hope it works out well for you and your family. You won't be the first people to go against the trend and not celebrate Christmas. Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a miserable time of the year as well, right? And so do some other groups. If you want to do that, you can do that. But don't shame other atheists for not doing it, for celebrating a family celebration and celebrating what must be the least religious festival in the world, right? Don't shame us for doing that, and don't claim that there's some kind of hypocrisy there, or what we're celebrating is the equivalent of celebrating Hitler's birthday, because I'm sorry, it's bollocks. Okay, interested to know what everybody else thinks about this. This will be the last video I make, I think, before Christmas. So for the rest of you, have a nice Christmas. Right, for Eisel Mazard, if that is your name, have a nice Mazard day, singing your new tunes and telling everybody your new stories. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye for now.